The Nevada desert has swallowed many souls, but few have returned. Joe Martinez, a 32-year-old hiker, disappeared without a trace in June 2019. A month later, he stumbled out of the dunes, barely alive, sunburned, and speaking in broken, fragmented sentences. He claimed that something had dragged him underground, and that he had been trapped in a place where time didn't move the same way. Authorities dismissed his account as hallucinations caused by dehydration. But Joe's body told a different story. His skin was burned in strange circular patterns, his eyes were sunken, and he refused to speak of what he had seen, except for one cryptic warning. They're still there, watching, waiting. The last known footsteps, Joe Martinez was no amateur when it came to survival. An experienced hiker and outdoor enthusiast, he had spent years exploring the harsh landscapes of Nevada. On June 7, 2019, he told his sister he was heading out for a solo trek near the Black Rock Desert, a place known for its strange lights, disappearances, and whispers of underground tunnels. His plan was simple, a 3-day hike, carrying enough supplies to last him a week. His phone last pinged a cell tower near a deserted mining town, and then, nothing. Search parties combed the area for weeks. Not a single trace of Joe was found. No footprints, no backpack, no signs of struggle. It was as if the desert had simply swallowed him whole. Then, 30 days later, he returned. The return, a man forever changed. Dawn on July 7th, a truck driver passing through a lonely stretch of Highway 447 spotted something staggering along the roadside. It was Joe, shirtless, sunburned, and barefoot, his eyes hollow and distant. Paramedics arrived within minutes. They expected severe dehydration, perhaps hallucinations. But as they examined his body, they found something far stranger. Burns, in strange circular patterns not from the sun, but as if his skin had been pressed against hot metal. His nails and hair hadn't grown at all in a month, something medically inexplicable. His pupils were dilated even in daylight, as if he had been underground for an extended period. His throat was raw, as if he had been screaming for days. When asked where he had been, Joe initially said, "Nothing." Then in a hoarse whisper he muttered, "They're still there, watching, waiting." The first words, "I wasn't alone." It took Joe 3 days before he could speak in full sentences. At first he only mumbled broken phrases in his hospital bed. The humming, it never stopped. The lights, they move under the sand. I wasn't alone. His sister Maria sat beside him, trying to coax him into explaining, but every time she asked what had happened, his hands trembled, and his breathing grew shallow, as if he was reliving something unspeakable. When he finally spoke, it was in a voice that didn't sound like his own. Dragged beneath the earth, Joe remembered the first 2 days of his hike clearly. He followed his planned route, taking photos, setting up camp at sunset. But on the third night, things changed. It started with a low, vibrating hum coming from the ground. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. It was rhythmic, almost like a machine deep underground. As the noise grew louder, the sand beneath his sleeping bag began to shift. Then, before he could react, something grabbed his ankles. "It pulled me down," Joe whispered, eyes darting to the corner of the hospital room, as if something might still be watching him. The sand, it swallowed me. The underground nightmare Joe described waking up somewhere beneath the desert. It was dark except for a faint green glow in the distance. He could hear whispers, though he couldn't understand them. He reached out, trying to feel his surroundings. The walls were smooth, cold, metallic. When he tried to stand, he realized something was moving in the shadows. There were figures. I couldn't see them, but I felt them watching me, studying me. I wasn't supposed to be there. Joe couldn't see them clearly, but he could feel them. Tall, thin figures moving in the shadows. Their presence wasn't human. They didn't breathe, didn't speak in any language he understood. Instead, the low humming sound that had swallowed him above ground was even louder down here, almost vibrating through his bones. Then, something touched him. It wasn't a hand. It was cold, metallic, jointed, like a machine, but alive. It traced his skin, stopping where the circular burns later appeared on his body. When he flinched, the presence stepped back, as if studying his reaction. They were testing me, Joe muttered in the hospital. Measuring something. But for what? The strange symbols. Joe wasn't sure how long he was trapped in that underground nightmare. Time didn't work the same way. He never felt hungry, never felt tired, but he knew time was passing. At one point he noticed something glowing faintly on the walls, symbols, strange jagged shapes that seemed to pulse with energy. When he reached out to touch one, the entire room shifted, the air vibrated, the whispers stopped, and the humming turned into a low mechanical growl. That's when he realized he had to get out. Now, the escape, or the release. Joe still doesn't know if he escaped or if they let him go. The last thing he remembers is the walls opening, the sand rushing in, and suddenly, he was waking up on the side of the highway, his skin burned, his mind shattered. He never saw the figures again, but sometimes late at night he still hears the humming. They're still there, he says, watching, waiting. Theories. What really happened to Joe Martinez? Joe's case has sparked endless debates. Some believe he hallucinated everything, suffering from extreme dehydration and heat stroke. Others think he may have stumbled upon a hidden underground base, something the government doesn't want anyone to know about. But there's one last, chilling detail. 2 months after Joe returned, a group of hikers vanished in the same area. The only thing search teams found? A backpack buried half in the sand, and inside, a notebook filled with the same strange symbols Joe described. Joe thought his nightmare had ended, but then the visions started, glimpses of something buried deep in his mind. They weren't dreams, they were memories. The first time it happened was 2 weeks after he returned. He was at home trying to live normally when suddenly, he blacked out. For a brief moment, he was no longer in his room. He was back underground. The missing time, Joe gasped as the walls around him shifted, their metallic surface pulsing with a strange green light. He could hear the humming again, deep and vibrating. And then, the figures returned. But this time he could see them. They were tall and thin, their bodies elongated, moving unnaturally through the dimly lit chamber. Their faces were featureless, except for large black eyes that reflected the strange symbols on the walls. Joe wanted to run, but he couldn't move. He felt paralyzed, just like before. And then one of them spoke. The message. The voice wasn't human. It wasn't even a sound. It was inside his head. You were not meant to leave. You have seen too much. You will return soon. Joe snapped back, into reality, gasping for breath. He was still in his bedroom, but his hands were shaking uncontrollably. His heart was pounding, and when he looked at his reflection in the mirror, his nose was bleeding. That's when he noticed something even worse. His watch was missing an entire hour. The mark terrified, Joe pulled up his sleeve, feeling a sharp sting on his forearm. What he saw made his stomach drop, a new mark. A fresh circular burn just like the ones he had when he first returned. But this one was different. It was shaped like one of the symbols on the walls. Something is coming. Joe knew, deep down, that this wasn't over. They had left something inside him, a message, a mark, a warning, and whatever it meant, they were coming back for him. Joe didn't sleep that night. He kept staring at the strange burn on his arm, tracing its jagged edges with trembling fingers. It wasn't just a mark. It itched, almost like something was moving beneath his skin. He grabbed a flashlight and rushed to the bathroom, locking the door behind him. He had to see it better. He had to know if it was just his imagination. But when he held the light closer to his skin, his blood ran cold. The mark wasn't just a burn. It was glowing. The static in the air. Then, His phone crackled. The screen glitched. For a second before going black. The bathroom light flickered and a sharp metallic ringing filled his ears. It was the same humming he heard underground. Joe stumbled back, clutching his head. It was getting louder, vibrating through his bones. He squeezed his eyes shut, and then everything stopped. Silence. No more static, no more ringing, just his own ragged breathing. A shadow at the window. Joe opened his eyes slowly, heart pounding. Everything in the bathroom seemed normal again, too normal. Then, a sound from the hallway. A slow, deliberate creak. Joe's breath caught in his throat. He turned off the flashlight, barely daring to move. Someone was inside his house. He crept toward the door, pressing his ear against it. Silence. Then, tap, tap, tap. Fingertips, lightly dragging across the wood. Something was standing right outside. Here Joe backed away, his mind racing. He had to get out, he had to run. But just as he reached for the window, a voice echoed through his mind. The same voice from before. It is time. A deep, shuddering breath escaped Joe's lips. He turned around. Slowly, and in the dim light of his bathroom mirror, he saw a tall, shadowy figure standing right behind him.